So just in the last month or so, I did a couple different YouTube live videos, and it's amazing to see the contrast between my first YouTube live and just my last two YouTube lives. And what was one of the biggest differences between those broadcasts was a result of kind of a internet baby that the gentleman that is with us today really championed. And that was Fort Collins Connections. So today's video and Zoom recording is going to be smooth, clean, clear. You're going to hear everything. And that's a lot thanks to the fiber internet that runs now to my house. And we are fortunate enough to have a 3-term former mayor, Mr. Wade Troxell, on with us today, that we're going to talk to you about lots of different things that are all about Fort Collins, what his perspective is, his background with CSU, both as a professor, former athlete, and champion of Colorado State University. So we are super honored to have our first guest on with Fort Collins fellas, Mr. Mayor, former Mayor Wade Troxell. So thank you for joining us.
Great to be here, Patrick and Chris. Great to join you.
Yeah, thanks for being here. We're super excited. And I think maybe we start out with, just a background on yourself. I mean, Patrick and I, we're both born and raised in Fort Collins. I know you are born and raised in Fort Collins as well, Colorado State. So why don't you just kind of give our audience just maybe a quick background on yourself and how you got into the political world and became mayor and all those things. I know your family history and your dad was big into it, but I'll just let you start us out and kind of get us started.
You bet. Well, like you guys, Fort Collins is my hometown, and how lucky are we to have Fort Collins as our hometown. But one of the things in growing up here, and I went to Poudre schools, and I played football, and I went to CSU on a football scholarship. I played 4 years, 3 years I started at center, and then all 4 years as a long snapper. Hey,
look at that right there.
Look at that. Love it. The short little dumpy centers, but great experience. And I also had the opportunity to get my degree in engineering. And after I finished my playing days, I just wanted to focus on my engineering. I went on for my master's and degree in mechanical engineering, worked at Kodak, came back for my PhD, and my area is robotics automation as it relates to controls. And I did a postdoc at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. That's been the 1 year that I didn't live in Fort Collins. So my entire life, just 1 year that I was in Edinburgh, Scotland, at the University of Edinburgh. And I've then been on the faculty in mechanical engineering for 30 plus years, and still involved with design and robotics and those sorts of things. About 15 years now ago, I was approached by some leaders in the community to run for city council, and I did, and I won. And I've been through 5 elections, won all of them, 2 as a city council member for District 4, which is Southwest Fort Collins, 4-year terms, 2 of them, and then ran for mayor and had 3 terms as mayor. So I was term limited as of last April. And so still involved in the community in many different ways, but just related to how did I get into, other than being approached and consider running for city council. I've always been aware of city council and why Fort Collins has been a great place. And it's really, I reflect upon this a lot about the leadership that we had 50 or more years ago that did things made Fort Collins the great place that it is, whether it be water or transportation or our electric system and so forth. So, I'm a big believer that these things just don't happen. They're not just accidental, but we need to really be intentional about our community and where we're going for the future so future generations can be so lucky as we have in living in Fort Collins and the community that we do have here.
I love it. You touched on something, everything that was done 50 years ago, and this wasn't by accident. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? What were some of the things I read about? I think it was like in the late 60s where the power lines were put underground I think it sounded like it was to help the views, but also with weather and things like that.
Yeah.
what are some of the things that kind of stand out to you that were done that we are now seeing the benefits of that a lot of people don't know about?
You bet. Well, you mentioned the undergrounding of our electric system. Well, we're a comprehensive municipality with 5 utilities: water, wastewater, stormwater, electric, and broadband now. And 50 years ago, and we're one of the handful, like 10 cities in the United States that's 99.9% undergrounded for our distribution system. So what does that mean? So what happened in Boulder, as fortunate as it was, but the initial thought was that it might have been the transmission lines that might have started the fire. That's happened in California and so forth. And so when we talk about our transmission lines, in a lot of locations, whenever a storm's coming, they prepare for power outages. We don't even think about that. So the reliability of our electric power system is one of the best in the United States. Our costs are relatively low as it relates to our electric power. What it does is it's safer. There was a boy that was, I think, flying a kite in the 1970s where that was electrocuted because of the above ground power lines. And that only made the undergrounding go quicker. But in 1969, the city council voted to underground the electric system. And that was 2 years ago now. And you think about that kind of decision, but you think of Fort Collins, where it was in terms of its population and its growth, and every development since then was undergrounded. So what we've had to do is underground our old town and our low-income neighborhoods and that sort of thing. So we undergrounded. So go to literally our neighbors to the south or wherever and drive down their major arterials, and you're also there with some power lines. We don't have that. So people talk about Fort Collins as being, wow, it's so clean. And well, they're also not looking through a bunch of wires when they look at the mountains. It's safer. You have clean view sheds, and you have more robust, reliable electric power. So it's multiple wins. And it was a decision that's a hard one to make because, when the decision was made in 69, they didn't have to do it that next year. They did it over the last 30, 40 years. And every subsequent development project had undergrounded lines as well. And so our, down, our main streets in our old town, and you talk about equity today. Well, we've always been concerned about everyone in our community, and everyone benefits from that. And so, our first capital tax was done I remember being in junior high at Lincoln Junior High, and the civics teacher, we looked at it was Designing Tomorrow Today. Well, that's what created the Lincoln Center in Fort Collins. That's what also created wastewater to low-income neighborhoods. Buckingham, Alta Vista, and Andersonville didn't have sewage systems until that capital tax. And so, those are things that people did through leadership and doing it for the right reasons. And now it's not like, we have to do this, that, and the other thing. We have a great community. It's beautiful and has great infrastructure and services for all in our community.
Yeah. Do you think that played a role in your intentionality to bring a fiber internet to Fort Collins, kind of knowing that background, having that history, and seeing where Fort Collins is going and needs to go with providing that type of fiber internet to everybody?
Precisely, because it was that kind of leadership 50 years ago that makes you think about what are we looking at 50 years from now. And I helped to create and chaired what is called the Futures Committee of the Fort Collins City Council. And that's where we're actually looking out to the horizon, not just the next year, but 50 years. And that's a differentiator. A lot of, we talk about politics today, the battles, they're about next year and next issue, as opposed to lift our head up. Where are we going? Are we going to end up where we want to end up in 50 years? And be more aspirational as to what we should be doing, not just head down and engaged in the battle of the day. And when we lift our head up, I think the one thing that is the impediment to a great city is average thinking. And so I think when, as a community, we engage in conversations as to, we're a great city, and how do we make it even better? And think about those kinds of things that really that city government can and should do, and that is provide for safety and enhance the living quality for all in our community. That's something that we can do. So things such as broadband is a legacy project, and that'll serve us well into the future. We're a digital society now, and so having that broadband, ubiquitous broadband throughout your community, but also, we're very much of a nature and environmental community too. So enjoying the kind of view sheds and the kind of open space that we do have that, creates quality of life, and the trails and those sorts of things. So, I think back 50 years ago, there's, I mentioned undergrounding, but there's also, we did a sign code in 1969. And that's when,
no billboards, baby.
The billboard days. And, that's where it's a more tasteful, identify your business and that sort of thing, but don't have, blinky lights and everything that, really detracts from, just a nice quality of life. And a third issue 50 years ago was we were a dry city up until 1969.
I was going to ask you about that at the end. I read that. I was like, how were you a dry city? This is Fort Collins, microbrew capital of the world.
Yeah. Well, from 1896 till 1969, wow. Basically within the city of Fort Collins, it was only 3-2 beers. So the town pump and so the liquor stores were located in the counties that surrounded the city, where JJ's is now, still liquor store. Or
great pizza, by the way.
Yeah, it is great pizza and charcoal broiler and so forth. Those were where you would get a drink. And so 1969. So those things are all part of it have impact on our community.
So interesting. You talk about the nature and preserving that, but also how broadband and technology, and you were into robotics, and one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, and I have an article here, and when talking with Patrick before this is I can make sure I get this right. You got involved, and you were one of the few mayors in the country talking about how drones, like the Federal Aviation Administration Drone Advisory Committee, and I'm like, I had no idea this was even a thing in Northern Colorado. And I know Patrick has got a few thoughts on this as well as a real estate agent and everything like that. But can you kind of go in and provide a little bit more information and context and like, what is this about? Is this something that Fort Collins is leading the nation in? And can you just elaborate a little bit on what that was all about and how they brought you into this? I think it was back in 2018, this article.
Yeah. Well, I served on the Drone Advisory Committee. That's a federal committee that advises the U.S. government, particularly the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, on rulemaking as it relates to drone. The drone is a fairly new phenomenon generally, and I've described it. It's a Kitty Hawk moment. There's 10 times more unmanned aircraft in our airspace today than there are manned aircraft, and growing exponentially. And so, but our rules around them are basically like barnstorming was when people began to fly. People would just land any old place and barnstorm and allow people to ride. And that's in the 1930s is when they created the FAA that actually, helped to provide some rule sets, air traffic control and that sort of thing. And so, we're still at our Kitty Hawk moment with drones. And with that, I was representing the National League of Cities as their representative as a member of the Drone Advisory Committee. And it's a federal committee that is made up of drone manufacturers, of service providers related to drones, industries that rely heavily upon drones. Real estate being one of those, of course, but, like railroads, BNSF, and others really rely upon drones, evaluating physical infrastructure, power lines, and that sort of thing. And so, and right now there's commercial delivery by drones in certain communities in the United States. In Christiansburg, Virginia, they have, delivery of goods and services. In the Raleigh Chapel Hill area, there's delivery of medical devices in a timely way, like defib equipment and things for surgeries and things like that. And so it's really finding a lot of applications, but if as it relates to urban centers, if when it becomes like the Jetsons and things are just flying above our house and sometimes they stop and privacy becomes a concern.
Yep.
And just general safety. If there's a drone that crashed into your house right now or wherever you are, who would you call?
Yeah.
Well, right now there's no local jurisdiction over drones. So you would need to call the FAA like it was a plane crash.
That's an easy phone call to make. Yeah, it'll go right through.
That's right, exactly. So anyway, it's an emerging area, and given my public policy, being a mayor, and also my interest in related to technology as it relates to whether it be autonomous vehicles in the sky or on the ground, and also the electric system, all these things interest, and whether I'm mayor or ex-mayor.
Yeah, I've got my drone sitting over here untouched as of the last I probably started looking at about 2 or 3 weeks ago. I don't even know where. I think I was reading an article and they were talking about how it's important for real estate agents to potentially explore drones, and then it was discussing a certificate of a drone operator.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, what is this? And so
Part 107.
Yeah. So I dove in and I was like, okay, so these fines are pretty real, and probably should go ahead and get my my pilot's license and go through that process. It seems like it's going to be relatively not easy per se, but not anything that's burdensome enough to outweigh the $23,000 to $250,000 fine, I think is what I read. And so, that bad boy is just sitting there until I've got the time to go ahead and get through that pilot's license.
So we help to create a drone center at CSU. And one of the things they do is they help pilots get their Part 107 license.
Oh.
So you can do that in partnership through the CSU Drone Center. Go to the colorado-state.edu and
I'm doing it.
Search on Drone Center. And it's very reasonable. And anyway, and for commercial applications, and if you're doing it for real estate, it requires that you have a Part 107 license.
Power 107.
Beautiful.
To kind of tag, like one of the notes I realized, and everybody talks about Fort Collins, best place to retire. I mean, it's been on so many lists, and Wade, this kind of really ties into like places of invention. And what is this award? It was the Lemonson. Am I saying this right? It was the exhibit in the Smithsonian, Washington, D.C. Tell us a little bit about that. Like, how did we win that, or some information? I had no idea about this.
Well, so it was about 12 years ago or so. We had some folks that from the Smithsonian came here I know one of the persons moved here and began to recognize that we had kind of this entrepreneurial ethos throughout our community. And in particular around energy, clean energy sorts of things. And the more this person investigated this, played right into an exhibit that the Smithsonian at the U.S. Museum of American History, they were curating related to invention in the United States. And they investigated 6 cities. 5 were in the past, like Hartford, Connecticut in the 1880s around replaceable components in a rifle and in manufacturing, all the way through Silicon Valley in the 1960s to hip hop in the Bronx, music becoming an innovative component, Minnesota related to medical devices in the 1960s, and Fort Collins being the current example of innovation for the future around clean energy. So the exhibit was set up and it ran for 5 years. I don't believe it's still at the U.S. Museum of American History, but there's a book about it, and it tells the story about energy and clean energy and around our powerhouse campus, our Energy Institute there at the Poudre River, and the culture where we work with together with businesses like with Eaton Corporation or Spray or Woodward, and we would do it in a collegial fashion, like over a beer. We'd talk about ideas, then we'd go and invent things. And so it talks about the innovative process, the co-creation, the community that cooperates together towards a better future for all. And innovation and entrepreneurship is definitely a collaborative process in and of itself. And, that's where, whether it be in real estate or another lines of work, it all plays into the desirable future for our community, because people get excited. It's just not a transactional community. Just give me your business and I'm done. No, it's a community where people care about the future and gets invested in it, whatever your line of work is. And so this whole notion of this places of invention at the Smithsonian really, I thought, told the story of our community.
It goes back to, you can't have that short-term vision in 1 or 2 years. This is 10, 20, 30-year projects. And I think that's great for the town and the city of Fort Collins, that we have that mindset. It's not like, hey, what are we going to do next year? It's just almost like putting bullets on or putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. It's like, this isn't going to solve anything.
Exactly. And we have a university. How fortunate are we to have a world-class Research One university? And all these things play together, right? Because we have a great university, we have great businesses, we have great places to live, and so therefore it's not a surprise that we make these best of lists, because it's where people want to be, live, work, play, and enjoy, and live life to the fullest.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things where we deal with a lot of clients that are moving from all over the country, and probably the most common denominator of why people are moving to Fort Collins is lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And coming here and bringing cool companies and ideas and personalities and culture, but wanting to be a part of something that is all about healthy living, friendly community, really cool vibe, where you just, like we're saying, there's no power lines to look at. It's just beautiful. And it's just consistent that the lifestyle has been molded by years past very intentionally, that now we are all very fortunate to bear fruit and hopefully continue to keep that in mind while moving towards the future and able to kind of maintain that beauty.
You bet. And the beauty comes in many ways. And this is where, when I talk, later today about nature in the city, that's another legacy project where you're no further than 10 minutes from a natural setting within the city. And so what that does is enhances livability in so many ways. You can have peace and quiet and those sorts of things. So it isn't all hard surfaces and those sorts of things and noise and hustle, but and so it's a blend of a lot of different things. It's around collegiality and getting together and enjoying friends and family and colleagues, but it's also time for reflection and enjoyment, and the birds and the flora and the fauna and all that sort of stuff. So, that's an important part of, where we live, and only to make it better, and you guys growing up here, you understand, and, a lot of the folks that I grew up with and so forth appreciate this. So it's not like trying to hold on to it and try to keep it static. It's really a dynamic of a community that makes it a desirable place to live. Places to eat, and with the brewery scene and bicycles, and and so that's where it brings a city more livable. And so I'm truly a believer in for the love of city, and that's where we're all co-creators. So we all have responsibilities in making our community better. And not that we're all trying to do the same thing. No, we all bring the elements that make it an even better place. And that means, people jump in and care about it.
Wait, what are you most proud of when you were mayor of Fort Collins? Your 3 terms?
I always really gave credit to the community and people like yourselves that are doing it every day.
You're allowed to be selfish right now, by the way. You can.
Yeah. Right. Well, I was really honored to serve in a capacity. We've talked about 50 years ago and that sort of thing, but I do think about leaders that have gone before us and our responsibility today. I think of Carl Carson.
I got this photo right here I found. I don't know.
That's good. You did your homework.
I went down this rabbit hole, Wade. It was good.
And so my dad was on council in the late 1960s, early 1970s, and Carl Carson and Tom Bennett, but Carl Carson in particular, he was a great mayor. And so I tend to model him he was president of Colorado Municipal League. And so I was a president of Colorado Municipal League. I was the last elected to be in that role since Mayor Carson. When I was 14, you guys can relate to this, I got a call from Mayor Carson saying that he was challenged to a race around Fort Collins it was called the Human Race. And he accepted, and he made me mayor for a day when I was 14. And so, I think about that because, I always had perspective of life, about Fort Collins and city government, that sort of stuff. And, that only heightened it being a mayor for the day when I was 14 years old, filling in on this race for Mayor Carson. So, and I think it's important, kind of telling the stories about the people that have gone before us. We've had great coaches. We've had great teachers that have, I talk about Coach Kennard a lot, that Kennard Middle School is named after, and he has helped an entire generation of boys in this community through his being a coach. And there's people like that all over and that are doing their part every day to make our community better. How fortunate are we to be in a community like that? I mean, we don't have scandal. We don't have people that, it's all out about them and taking, but we have a very much of a giving, caring, engaged community for those that will come after us.
Well, I can tell you that, my perspective was, this is probably, I think 3 years ago now, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And we were at a family dinner, and the news kind of broke that my Uncle Mark was going to run for mayor. And I was kind of just like, this is bad. I was like, Mayor Wade Troxell is beloved by all. Like he's everyone really, like, it was, you couldn't guess what your political, background was based off of the way that you treated people and, conducted business. So I was like, this isn't good. I don't want, a Soukup to get just demolished, but then I forgot that he lives in Timnath, mayor of Timnath. So it wasn't going to be running up against you. So I was like, okay, we're good here. But I remember when I heard that, and I just, you had such a good positive impact, and we're so open and involved and engaged with the community that was, we were very fortunate to have you those, 6 years as our mayor.
Well, thanks. And, we've had great families in our community over multiple generations. And so the Soukups and your grandfather's store in downtown and growing up with your father and uncles in the community and doing all different sorts of things over time. And those families that have been here for multiple generations, really, I think there's a great story there, whether it's Romero's or Carbajals or, there's many been, great in our community.
Quick question. So my mom is from Austria. My whole family is like Romanian. And we love going to the drugstore on North College, owned by that. I don't even know her name. I've only met her a couple of times. Do you have any stories about that, or how did that come about?
No, I know when they had to move from where now Rare is to there, and I
didn't know it was at Rare before that.
Yeah, they kind of kept that. They're unique. It's a unique store.
It's amazing. I mean, if you haven't been there, I mean, they got authentic German chocolates. I mean, it's a great little shop. We love going there. Wait, we don't want to take up too much of your time. I just got a couple other things I just wanted to kind of touch on that are kind of in the news right now. And obviously water. Everybody's talking about water and what's going on in Severance. And, what are your thoughts on, water in Northern Colorado and how that's impacting growth or maybe, what's your take on that, or what needs to be done, or what's being done?
Right. Well, water is a great topic, and water is defining of this area, and it has from the very beginning. So back when it was Union Colony, before it was Greeley, and when Fort Collins was digging a lot of the ditches that diverted water off the Poudre River, and throughout our community, those ditches that whether it be Arthur's Ditch or all throughout our community, and it basically diverted so much water that after the Civil War, and it was Union Colony with a lot of Union soldiers living in Greeley, they marched up the Dry River to Fort Collins, and it was almost a war between Fort Collins and Greeley based on water. And so it was at that time, and when Colorado State University, Colorado Agricultural College, one of the first three professors was Elwood Mead of Lake Mead, and he became the commissioner of the Colorado River. And that's, in the late 30s, 40s, that's when the Colorado Big Thompson Water Project was built, that diverted water from the western slope, from the Colorado River through Adams Tunnel and Lake Estes and into our Horsetooth Reservoir. So Fort Collins has two water supplies, the Poudre River and Horsetooth. Now, with that said, in the 1980s, there was significant effort to limit growth. And the way that people went about that was limiting water taps in Fort Collins. So Fort Collins is well planned for its water future. We have a lot of senior water rights and that sort of thing. But when they limited taps, that's when Elko and Fort Collins Loveland Water District and others water districts were formed. And they didn't have quite the senior rights for water that we enjoy here for Colorado, Fort Collins proper. So Fort Collins is actually served about 2/3 by Fort Collins water utilities, and the other 1/3 is by water districts and that sort of thing. So what that does is put a premium on water, particularly for those emerging areas where a lot of our development's going on. Mm-hmm. And as it relates to newer communities that are expanding, they're having to identify where their water is. Mm-hmm. My personal view, and so a lot of water law and so forth was created here. And Colorado State University has educated half of the water ministers around the world in their master's program, PhD programs at Colorado State University. So water education and understanding of water management really as a discipline started and has a strong center here in Fort Collins in northern Colorado. With all that said, I think there's a lot of opportunity for water innovation. I think there's plenty of water. There's just not enough water at the right place, right time for the right purpose. And so, so that's where conservation and other things, that we can actually utilize the same amount of water in multiple ways if we can cooperatively construct ways to do that. So you can monetize a bigger portion of the same amount of water. And so there's ways that can be done, but that will take creativity, innovation, technology, and some other things. And so that doesn't get to where Severance is now and the predicament they're in, but that does play to, the story hasn't changed from literally the very beginning of northern Colorado.
I actually went to the city council when you were mayor. I went to the city council meeting when Montava was being discussed, mm-hmm. and Max Moss and all them, and that was really interesting to get everybody's take. And I'll tell you,
and Moss and Max is being very creative, and it's not in the same model as what Elko might have envisioned. And they've invested a lot in infrastructure, but they also have to be cost competitive too. So the market does have a play in how this all will be played out.
That's definitely fascinating.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I've got a couple fun ones for you to kind of to bring us home. First, on a CSU football type deal, how do you think Coach Jay Norvell is going to do for us?
What little I've seen so far, and it's only been a month and a half now, has been very impressive. My concern was fit, that there's a strong fit to the team, Northern Colorado, and I think he's knocked it out of the park. The kinds of things that he's been doing, reaching out to former players and coaches, and really creating a lot of excitement about the program. And, I think there's no reason why we can't have a top program just through facilities and excitement. And so I'm very hopeful at this point. I haven't met him yet. I look forward to that in the not too distant future. I think the assistant coaches that he's brought on, and that first week and the recruits that he's been able to, it's a changing landscape for through transfer portals and other sorts of things. And, he's seems to be very effective in how, all those, the dynamics of that business are changing.
Well, CSU's got some pretty exciting things going on. As we're filming this, we just beat Nevada basketball last night. I think that brought us to 16-1 or 15-1. I can't remember.
16 now.
But and then football, when our previous coach was hired, it just kind of was there was a blah feel. But when Coach Jay Norvell was hired, it was, our previous running back, Coach Tony Alford, tweeted about it, and there's just this general excitement around CSU athletics, which is really fun to see. Now, I've got, my background in track and field, which the track program has been pretty phenomenal for a long time. And so we're pretty excited and fortunate to have, when it really gets down to it, CSU or Fort Collins is still its backbone is CSU. So it is a vital importance for CSU to be successful on all fronts. And, whether you agree or disagree, sports and athletics is a big part of college.
Speaking about sports in Northern Colorado and elite sports, particularly, and, I think there's some opportunities there that we can have in Northern Colorado. I worked with a grassroots group to help build a community open track in Fort Collins. And I think that's moving forward in some degree where there's some funding and commitment, and you think about Boulder and bike riding and some other things, there's no reason at altitude and other that we shouldn't have our stake in elite sports. And Patrick and your wife and family are clearly involved with that. And I think that's an opportunity that we do have in whether it be Fort Collins, just Northern Colorado, the great environment for training and so forth. And we have the Olympic Center in Colorado Springs, but I like to think we're as much a champion city as Olympic City as Colorado Springs.
All right, that's a perfect segue, because I was going to ask you as we wrap things up, Choice City. Where did Choice City come from? Yeah.
Well, and Berthoud's like the Garden City and so forth. And, it was very much, I think, a name of Colorado, and it's always been the Choice City. And, I remember that going back many years, and, not too many people refer to it as Choice City of Colorado, but I think we know what that means.
I mean, this has been great, Wade. I think, wait, one last question. Favorite brewery?
Oh, on what day?
Ooh, great question. On a summer, here we go.
Oh, okay.
On a summer afternoon to end the week. We're talking either whether you're entering it on Thursday or Friday, but a summer afternoon.
Great. I think Fort Collins, we're blessed weather-wise, and we have great patios. And, I think Odell's has one of the best patios, but you can't go wrong. And I love each brewery has a niche, whether it be kind of a neighborhood and the thing is about the brewery industry here, it's not about pounding beers so much. It is appreciation and bringing people together for, just enjoying good food and good beer. And so, I think all those things, kind of play into that Choice City of Colorado.
Absolutely.
I love it.
Wade, former mayor, Mr. Wade Troxell, I really do. I appreciate you and your time, what you did for Fort Collins, what you're doing for Fort Collins and CSU. We're blessed to have people such as yourself in and around our community that give so much without wanting anything necessarily in return. So I appreciate you giving us your time this afternoon and providing us all these, great tidbits of knowledge, history, factoids that, I learned a lot myself personally.
Yeah, Wade, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And, we'll just let you, any last thought for the viewers and everybody as we kind of sign off here.
Well, I just want to thank you, Chris, and you, Patrick, and what you're doing. And it's people like you that make Fort Collins a great place and really, are out there and telling our story, but also living it every day. And with that, I'm honored to be part of your first program. And I wish you enormous success, and anything I can do, I'm with you.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much.